me on the show. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I'm good, thank you. I know we were going back and forth on dates, but it's so nice to finally be able to speak to you on this platform as you are a huge contribution to why this kind of platform even exists and why I'm even talking about young women's mental health today.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
But where did your drive and passion to educate and support South Asians women's mental health kind of stem from?
Yeah, so my passion really stemmed from my own lived experience. It was around kind of if I think back to my childhood, I think I always struggled with my mental health. And coming from South Asian background, we obviously didn't really speak about emotions or mental health much. I didn't really know what mental health was. It was only through my own lived experience that I learned what it truly meant. And I think growing up within our community, I had always put these expectations on myself, and society and our community have put these expectations on myself in terms of who I am, who I should be, what I should be doing, and what roles I should play within society as, perfect daughter, eventually to then become someone's wife and a mother of children. So I think those narratives I really internalized. And when I started to struggle with my mental health, I didn't know what to do. It felt wrong to be, feeling this way, and I didn't know who to share it to and even how to articulate that. I think within our community, we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect and to be the best at everything we do. And when I was struggling with my mental health, I didn't feel like I was being able to positively add anything to the way in which other people would perceive me. So it put a lot of pressure on me, and I kept it within myself. And then it was only as I went through this journey and I started to learn more around mental health and how many people it actually does affect that I decided that the only way to tackle the stigma is to talk about it and to share my experiences. And then there'll be so many more people who will hopefully listen to what I'm saying and resonate and also feel empowered to be able to share their own experiences, because I think there's a long way that we have to go still when it comes to educating around mental health specifically for women and supporting them and empowering them through that process to seek support and share their experiences openly.
I completely agree, especially with just being a South Asian and not really being represented accurately in the media or feeling like we don't have support or, being able to, let's say if you do need help, you can't really say, oh, I need help because you're seen as weak and you're seen as dramatic and you need to kind of get over it. So we feel like we can't really connect with, therapists or seeking help because there's like a stigma around that. And so you definitely are doing such amazing things around this, but is there any other reason why it's really important to raise awareness within the South Asian community, given the cultural barriers and language difficulties?
Yeah, so I think aside from the stigma, there are so many reasons why we should be talking, about mental health within our community and going that extra mile to engage our community when it comes to mental health conversations, because we have our own specific cultural and traditional beliefs that play a role in terms of how we view mental health. We're also exposed to the media. So, for example, I was born and brought up in the UK, but I grew up watching a lot of Bollywood, and Bollywood's portrayal of mental health is unfortunately not accurate, and it's not positive in the way that they show mental health. I remember when I was growing up, we were still seeing mental health as someone who is in an asylum and being locked away. And that all impacts the way in which we then view mental health and how we then talk about it in our own communities. And then, as well as that, religion also plays a big role within our communities. And some people struggle to understand how mental health aligns with religious beliefs. And for example, if someone is struggling with their mental health, do you seek medical support, or do you seek the support from a religious leader within your community? There are lots of different nuanced experiences which I don't see being talked about within main course discourse around mental health. And I think that's why it's so important that there is that representation of experiences from the South Asian community, and especially experiences of females within the South Asian community.
Yes, definitely. Hearing stories, successful stories of how women have struggled with mental health issues that a lot of young women, especially in the South Asian community, face but aren't really talked about or discussed, or they can't really see themselves represented accuracy. But that is a huge part to play is representation, but also I feel like being educated on what our feelings actually mean, and identifying what really mental health is, and what a good, and how to have a more better mindset, how to physically and mentally become better. It's just a lack of education, really, especially in the school systems and, in our local communities. How can we kind of like address and encourage open discussions about mental health within the community without raising alarms or feeling like people can't really come forward because of the environment? They don't feel safe enough to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's really important to take a couple of steps back and revisit the really fundamentals around mental health. And I think, like you said, is that there is just not that education around mental health. And I think, like I said, our understanding of mental health is driven by our own lived experiences, the experiences of those around us, what we consume through media, other people's beliefs around mental health. So that means that, in essence, we're missing a fundamental standardized education around what mental health actually is. So I think the best way that we can create safe spaces for people to open up is to actually begin with talking about mental health in a very in its simplest form. So, in the same way that we have physical health, we have mental health. Mental health is something that every single human being has. It's not something that only certain people have. And then, if that means that if it's something that we all have, then it means that it's something that we all need to look after. So in the same way that we would go to the doctors if we had, pain, or we had a broken arm or a broken leg, then in the same way that if we are struggling with our mental health in some shape or form, we should be able to go to the doctors, and there shouldn't be that stigma around it. So I think it's really about taking it in bite-sized steps and taking everyone along that journey to build their educational awareness in a way that feels comfortable and safe. And I think what's really important is breaking down some of those typical stereotypes or myths that people might have around mental health. So, some people might believe that, mental health issues are someone's fault or are caused by a certain incident. So I think it's really important to debunk all of those and create safe spaces for learning. And I think the best way to create safe spaces for learning is having a room full of individuals who feel safe to be able to question, to be able to ask questions, to be able to, bring some of these beliefs and assumptions that they have to the table and willingly work through, perhaps changing those and learning what is true and what is correct when it comes to mental health. And I think a lot of that comes down to empathy and active listening. I think all of us as individuals have the power to create safe spaces for people to be able to talk about mental health. And we can all do that by building and working on our empathy skills, and also by building on our active listening skills as well. Oftentimes when people talk to us, unfortunately, we listen with the intention of responding. We don't listen with the intention of truly listening. And I think if we can become better listeners, then we can automatically help create those safe spaces for other people.
That's a really beautiful way of putting it, to what you said about actually listening rather than coming up with a solution. Of course, we want to help the person we see struggling, they're opening up to us, and we feel like we need to come with a solution and we need to come up with an answer. But actually just listening to them, even if, having being the shoulder they need to cry on, or maybe just making them feel just safe to be able to have an open discussion where they're not going to feel judged or feel like they're wrong for feeling these feelings. And I think going back to what you said about breaking down stereotypes of what is seemed as good mental health, and if you're having an off day, it's just maybe an off day, and brushing your feelings, just shoving it under a rug and not really addressing it. That is a huge part of why I believe that young women's mental health is not really addressed enough, because we're not, in a way, we're not sharing these stories, we're not sharing our feelings, we're not sharing how to have good mental health. And I feel like we actively do need to be progressing how we feel, and having these open discussions, I think, will really help in our community. But as a South Asian woman who has had a lot of battles with your mental illnesses. What are some ways that you have been able to have a better mindset and be able to accept that you need help?
That's a good question. I think for me, what was really important was to be honest with myself. I think I felt a lot of pressure, I think specifically as a South Asian female, to always put other people before myself. And I think we all have this habit as females within our community, which is that we are kind of born and brought up by thinking that we need to be doing things for other people and we need to put others before ourselves. So whether it's our parents or eventually when we get older, our children, our family members. So I think amongst all of this, I had basically forgotten about myself. So the first thing I needed to do was to be honest with myself and firstly accept that I was struggling and that if I was struggling, I deserved to get support and I deserved to give myself that attention to feel better. I think a lot of it was around rebuilding my self-esteem and seeing myself as worthy of getting the support that I needed. So I think that was really the big first step. And I think the next step I had to take was to reflect on the surroundings around me and also looking at my own perceptions and understandings of mental health and also myself. So I think I had put such intense expectations on myself, whether it was with academics, I felt like my entire worth was based off of my academics, or as I've grown older, then my worth is dependent on, the career that I have, or later in the future, marriage and things like that. So I think I really had to almost unlearn some of those narratives that I had put on myself and separate myself from some of those very, I guess, traditional narratives of what a South Asian female should be like. And I think living in the UK, I had always felt conflicted between my identity as a South Asian and my roots versus, the life that we live within the UK. So I think there was a lot of reflection and self-awareness I had to build at that point of time and to understand where some of this pressure was coming from. So was this pressure created by myself? Was this pressure created by family members or the extended community around me? So it definitely took me a lot of time, and I'd say anyone in this position, to really understand, potentially what are those areas in your life, if any, that are kind of making you feel worse or adding to the situation. And then I think the third step I had to take was then to actually express how I was feeling with other people. So I went to my parents and my siblings and having that conversation around how I was feeling. And I think it was obviously a difficult conversation to have at first because everyone has, as I said, everyone has very different views of and understandings of mental health. And I think traditionally within our community, we perceive mental health as more negative than we do positive. So I think there was a lot of collaborative learning that we needed to do together to be able to for me to be able to feel like I had a safe space where I could open up and have these conversations and I felt like I was being understood, but also enabling and giving the space to, my parents, my family, to be able to do some of that learning and reflection that I had done previously. And I won't lie and say that it was easy. Like, it was very hard to have those conversations initially. And even still, sometimes we have these conversations and there are just such differing understandings and views of mental health. But I think what I found really helpful was leveraging resources. So I found a lot of resources online from like charities like the Samaritans and Mind, which had basically talked about mental health in very simple terms. So what is mental health? What is not mental health? What does good mental health look like? What does bad mental health look like? And also talking about mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. So in a sense, those really tools that I could then share with other people to help them understand a little bit better rather than me feeling like I had to explain everything. And then from then, I felt confident enough to be able to see my GP and to seek support. And at that point, my GP diagnosed me with depression and anxiety. And then I started to seek counselling. So I started to do CBT sessions, which were helpful. I also started antidepressants, which did help as well. So for me, it's been a journey of trying lots of different things. And even now, I'm still finding different things that help me. So for me, it's really important on a day-to-day basis that I find the time to do the things that make me feel good, but also that I have, I guess, go-to things to do when I'm not having a good day, or something triggers me, or everything just feels really overwhelming. And I think the thing with mental health is that there's never a point at which you're 100% recovered if you are struggling with a mental health condition. Is actually a journey, and you've just got to find the different things that help you at lots of different points. And I think there's a lot of advice out there around, mental health, and how to seek support for mental health, or how to look after your mental health. But a lot of those resources and conversations aren't tailored to South Asian females. And I think that's why it's so important for me when I do the work that I do, is to focus in on those specific experiences of South Asian females, because I know it's not easy to talk to your parents, to talk to your family around how you're feeling. It's not easy to move away from some of those expectations or roles you're expected to play on a day-to-day basis. There is a stigma, there is a lack of understanding, and there is also the shame element. Our community, unfortunately, views mental health as something that's shameful, and can is something that we should shy away from. So I think it's so important that if you are a South Asian female going through this journey, that you try to find spaces and conversations that also reflect your specific experiences. And I hope that I can do a positive job in contributing towards that. And I know that conversations and radio shows like this are a great method through which to provide that for our young South Asian females.
I really, really admire your courage to actually holding your hands up and saying to your family, because I know that must have been really hard, especially because you've at times, I know in South Asian families, mental health isn't really addressed. Like, it's not really spoken about. It's like a taboo topic that no one really talks about. Maybe we see it on the social media, but to actually sit down with your family and address how you feel, knowing that maybe they're not educated from their generation, they're not really educated on any, they probably know the basic mental illnesses, but not really, especially in young women, and the mental health issues we face now as this generation. So to actually sit down and have that candid conversation with your family must have been really scary. But do you feel like if you didn't have that conversation, you wouldn't have been able to take the next step of actually seeing your GP?
I don't think I would have been able to. I think having that conversation for me was really important to almost confirm what was going on. And that sounds a bit strange at first, but if I explain it a little bit more, it makes more sense. I think I was also still in denial of what I was experiencing, and I had spent so long masking everything that I was experiencing. I remember feeling just so terrible and really, really struggling, and I would go into my room and maybe cry, or do whatever I needed to do in that moment, and just somehow walk out my room with a smile on my face. And I think that was so draining physically, emotionally, mentally, to pretend that I was okay. So I think having that conversation with my parents, it kind of felt like I had no other choice at that point, because I was so exhausted from just pretending that everything was okay. And having that conversation with them was almost like the biggest release, because it just allowed me to be myself a little bit more, and not have to pretend like everything's okay, and put everyone else first. Like, it was a moment where I could finally just like understand and accept what was going on for me. And it also, I think at the time, it caused a lot of tension between family members. But I think if I look back at it now, like years later, it actually allowed me to develop a closer relationship with my parents and my family members by having that open and honest conversation. And since then, we've been able to create safe spaces for my parents or other family members to talk openly about mental health. So, for example, now when I go to weddings or I go to family events, like, my relatives are comfortable to talk about mental health because they've had this safe space created for them. And I know that if you told me that when I was like 13 years old and really struggling, I would have never believed you. But it just goes to show that taking those small steps has such a big impact. And even though you're going through that journey for yourself, you don't know who else you might be supporting by just kind of holding your hands up and being quite honest and open about it, even though it is really, really tough at the time.
Yeah, that's amazing though. You were able to, from your own battle, you were able to then create a safe space for all your family members. And, you know, now they're able to have an open discussion about mental health, and it's a normal topic to discuss now, rather than it being kind of that shamed feeling. But going back to you said about just having the life and social pressures, like your education, maybe within your friendship group, or maybe just being a good daughter, or what a good South Asian girl should be. You know, we kind of have those roles of being, you know, you have to be quiet, you have to listen to your parents, you have to be good at, you know, all your academic studies and be the best version of yourself, which when we're taught that as at a young age, it's very damaging to our mental health. And like you said about masking your feelings and emotions and crying one minute and then pretending to be happy the next minute because that's the role we have to play. How do you think we can break down those narratives and also break down those traditional roles of being a good South Asian girl?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think the biggest thing that you can do is try your best to not enforce these narratives because, you know, we don't live in the same world that we used to live in at the time that these narratives and roles, traditional gendered roles were created. We live in a very different world now, especially if you're, you know, like us living within the UK as well. Like you live a completely different lifestyle, and I think it's, you know, and I feel like I was always the one who challenged these roles and these stereotypes, and as a child, I think that kind of got me in trouble at times, and I felt very not heard and very isolated at times because I did challenge some of these things. So as hard as it is, I would definitely say like I would encourage people to challenge those thoughts and those beliefs because I think only by challenging are you then able to create an opportunity for reflection and then an opportunity upon reflection to be able to start to break down and move away from them from some of those traditional narratives. And I think it's really important as like a young South Asian female yourself as well to not feel like you have to carry the burden of all of those expectations. I know sometimes a lot of expectations are actually never actually verbalized sometimes. Some of those expectations are ones that you pick up from what you see online or what you see on TV or what you've seen within interactions between family or for what you've seen between generations to generations, and you then internalize a lot of those narratives. I did a lot of that. Like I don't ever remember like my parents ever actually verbally articulating some of these expectations for me. These are some that I just picked up and I created for myself. So I think it's really important to challenge yourself in that sense as well to, okay, is this something I've picked up and where is this thought process coming from? Why do I think that doing this makes me a bad child? Or why do I think doing this makes me a good child? And this is actually something I've explored within therapy. So I earlier this year, I had a South Asian therapist, and a lot of what she focused on with me was around breaking down some of these narratives. So it's only this year actually that I realized that I had such a skewed narrative in my head of what makes a good child. Like I genuinely was thinking that even saying no to something or doing something 10 minutes later than I should have made me a bad child. So I think a lot of it is around reflection and working through and breaking those narratives. And then doing stuff differently can be challenging because it can cause friction. So for example, if I want to do more things for myself and I want to start to put myself first, it can be really challenging and you will receive at times, you know, not the best response from those around you because you're behaving differently than you usually would. But I think it once again, it's a journey. And I know that having gone on this journey now, how challenging it is, but also how liberating it is to break free from some of those narratives and truly find who you are. I think one thing I wish I did earlier and when I was younger was actually sit with myself and think, who am I? And how much of who I am is dictated by other people and other things, and how much of who I am and what I like to do is actually me. And I think I'm 22, I'm turning 23 this year, and I'm just about getting around to finding things that I actually like versus what I think I should like or how I think I should behave.
Yeah.
So I think it's pouring into our own cup as much as possible. And it just doesn't need to be anything like done really quickly or really grand. It can just be really small steps that you take on a day-to-day basis to break those narratives and truly find yourself.
Thank you, Tanya.
Stay tuned to Salam Radio after this short ad break.
For the top pizza in Peterborough, visit Top's Pizza, established in 1988 for delicious pizzas with freshly made dough daily. View the extensive and mouth-watering menu online at topspizza.co.uk, then choose from traditional tasty toppings, something different, or create your own with fresh 100% halal meats, salads, veg, and a great choice of sides too. Call into Top's Pizza, 52 Broadway, PE1 1SB. Call 01733 913 775 or order online for delivery or collection.
At Master's Pharmacy, we put your health and convenience first. We offer free blood pressure checks and blister-packed medication. With our free same-day prescription delivery service, you can have your medication when you need it. We also offer travel vaccinations, including Hajj and Umrah, along with other services to meet all your pharmacy needs. For more information, contact Master's Pharmacy on 01733 567 208 or visit us at 303 Lincoln Road, PE1 2PH.
Thinking of laser hair removal but worried about cost? Well Skin Clinic, Peterborough's #1 aesthetic clinic, offers 0% finance on courses of laser hair removal. We perform thousands of treatments using the Soprano titanium in our prestigious clinic. Virtually pain-free and suitable for all skin types, our team of aesthetic professionals can help you achieve your goals affordably. Well Skin Clinic, making life-changing aesthetic treatments affordable for all. 40 Cowgate, Peterborough. Call or WhatsApp us on 01733 555540.
Do you own a restaurant or takeaway? Cater Fair is an expert supplier of new and used commercial catering equipment. Visit caterfair.co.uk for quality equipment on sale at the lowest prices, or call us on 01733 310 115 or visit us at 11 Royce Road, Fengate, Peterborough.
At Cake Inn, all our cakes and slices are freshly baked for that delicious taste. At Cake Inn, we bake 100% vegetarian and halal eggless fresh cream cakes. Delicious flavoured cakes for birthdays and weddings, ceremonies and all other occasions, with free customised messages, even balloons and candles too. Order for delivery or collection from Cake Inn, 489 Lincoln Road, PE1 2PE, and your cake could be ready within 2 hours. Find out more and order online at cakein.co.uk or call 01733 496 584.
Masterminds Tuition Academy is for your high schoolers, your something to provers, your subject strugglers and keen learners, your brave jumpers and fist pumpers. Affordable personalised learning plans are delivered through our centres in schools across Peterborough. But not to worry, we also provide online and home visits with flexible timings. Whether it is maths, English, science or 11 plus, Masterminds is a must. Find us on all socials and visit our website mastermindstuitionacademy.com or call us on 07516 166 003. Masterminds, master the matrix.
Salam Radio wishes all of our community Ramadan Mubarak.
Assalamu alaikum. You are tuning into Her Chronicles. And so thank you, Tanya, for kind of speaking about your the realization you had in therapy about identifying these narratives that we have internalized and how they make us feel like we're not good enough. And we just need to break these narratives down to be able to, in a way, forgive ourselves and move forward and not feel like we're doing something wrong or we're bad people for having, like a traditional mindset to how it used to be. But could you tell me more about your role and involvement in the Baton of Hope organization?
Yeah, sure. So the Battle of Hope is something that was born over a year and a half ago now, by a group of us basically who had met through the mental health suicide prevention space and all have our own lived experience with suicide prevention. And it really was an idea to bring suicide prevention to the national platform and to have a national level conversation around suicide prevention. And we really wanted to involve every single community, individual, business, company, organization within this conversation. And we thought about the fact that, we talk about physical health a lot. We have, physical symbols of physical health. So for example, with sporting events, we have trophies, we have medals, we have the Olympic torch that represents physical health, but we don't have any symbol for mental health. And that's why we created a physical baton, which we call a Baton of Hope, which we wanted to take around the UK to spark this national level conversation. So myself and around 8 others, we basically, formed a charity and put together this incredible tour, which took place last year during summer, where we went to 12 cities within 12 days. And, we spent the entire day, in essence, in that city, touring the entire city with the baton. We had different people who have lived experience with suicide to carry the baton and pass it from each other to each other. And we held events, we engaged, local council, local celebrities, we had local communities there to really just have a space to talk around suicide prevention and understand the actions that we can take when it comes to preventing suicide. And now, as we're moving into this year, we're planning our tour for next year. I've just joined on board as a trustee, so lots of exciting plans coming up. But I think for me, it was really, my own lived experience with suicide as a suicide survivor. It's really important that we talk more about suicide. And I think suicide is such an uncomfortable conversation for people, and it's a conversation we often ignore. However, it doesn't change the fact that unfortunately within the UK, we lose 17 people a day to suicide. And if you look at the figures from the South Asian community, unfortunately, there is not accurate reporting when it comes to statistics from the South Asian community, because there is still so much stigma around suicide that, for example, when someone does die by suicide within our community, oftentimes suicide is not the listed reason on the death certificate. And but from my own lived experience, from conversations I have within the space, I think we all unfortunately know of someone or a family member of someone or a friend of a friend or someone within our wider community who has died by suicide or has been impacted by suicide. So for me, it's really important, one, to bring that suicide prevention conversation and empower people to understand that we all have a role to play when it comes to preventing suicide, but also more specifically within the South Asian community, where we are losing so many people to suicide, but we're just not talking about it. To really highlight that and to continue these conversations on within our community and our wider family so that we can help prevent suicide.
I really, really love the tour aspect that you did to raise awareness. I mean, you must have got really great positive feedback from doing that and getting the community involved.
Yeah, definitely. I think it definitely one of a kind. And I mean, I did all 12 days and I can't even tell you how incredible it was. It was the most special experience of my life. Like, we met tons of thousands of individuals who, care about suicide prevention, either have lived experience of it or have been impacted by it. And to just see people come together and focus on hope, so focus on the hope that exists within society, that we all can work together to prevent suicide and support people within the mental health crisis point, was really magical. And, we ended the 12-day tour at 10 Downing Street, where we met with the Minister of Health. And it just felt like that was the perfect ending to the 12 days, because that we took everything we heard, we spoke about, we discussed with local communities and organisations, and we took that to the government, those who are in charge of creating a strategy around suicide prevention, and to be able to then have those conversations at 10 Downing Street around, okay, on a national level, how are we going to work together to prevent suicide? It just felt very surreal, and I think, even now I'm still processing how it was, and there's so many beautiful things that have come from that tour. We've got local and regional communities that have just organically been built, because just on those days as well, so many people were able to connect with each other and build friendships and relationships out of that, and continue their work around suicide prevention. So yeah, it was all very special.
That's amazing, especially getting the Minister of Health involved as well to actually get this organization higher in terms of raising awareness, but also bringing people together who have struggled with suicide, or they know someone who has, and they don't know where to go for support, or they don't really understand or identify the feelings that they're feeling. So to be able to speak with people who know exactly how they feel, and have connections and have friendships through that, is a really beautiful thing. How can individuals get involved or support the work of suicide prevention, do you think?
So I think obviously there's lots of charities, including Bastion of Hope, which individuals can go to as a first point of contact if they are interested in learning more around suicide prevention and the work that takes place. But I think when it comes to each and every person getting involved with suicide prevention, I think it's really important to understand, firstly, that suicide is something that does not discriminate. It can impact each and every one of us at any point of our lives. And, I think it goes back to that previous conversation we had around talking about mental health. In a similar way, when it comes to talking about suicide prevention, we need to be educated around, what suicide actually is, and who it impacts and how it impacts them. What does it look like? And then breaking down a lot of those myths and stereotypes around suicide. So once again, within society, we often have this stereotype that suicide is only caused by a mental health condition. That's not true. People can die by suicide or be impacted by suicidal ideation, even if they do not have a pre-existing mental health condition. Similarly, people often think that, there's a certain type of person who's impacted by suicide. And oftentimes we think, suicide is so far removed from us, it's never going to impact us. But in reality, it can impact any one of us at any given time. So I think it's really important to reflect on your own narratives and perceptions of how you view suicide, and then, building that education around what actually is suicide and how does it impact people who are impacted by suicide. I think that's a great first step. And I think it's really just understanding that the role that you can play within preventing suicide can be as simple as just having safe conversations with people. So, for example, whether it's family or friends or someone maybe just asking them, are you okay? And if they say, yeah, I'm fine, but you're noticing signs or you're feeling worried about them and you just can't pinpoint what it is, perhaps just asking them twice and asking, I've noticed that you're a bit quiet or you're behaving slightly differently. I just wanted to double check. Are you sure you're okay? I'm always here if you want to talk to me. So I think just really having that empathy and asking again sometimes can definitely save lives. And when it comes to having safe conversations, it goes back to that empathy, that active listening piece. It can be really difficult if you're trying to support someone or someone who is struggling with their mental health. And it can be really, really scary to even think that they might be thinking of suicide. But in reality, we know now that, actually asking and talking about suicide can save lives. So, you can provide safe spaces by actually just asking someone. Let's say you're speaking to someone who's really struggling with their mental health and they're saying things which sound like they're thinking of suicide. Perhaps asking them, like, I know this is a really tough question, but are you thinking of suicide? And if they say yes, then there are lots of, you can reach out to lots of services, crisis lines. If it's an emergency, you can obviously call 999. And that leads me on to a really important point, and I think it's so crucial, is that there is so much suicide prevention training out there. So, for example, I completed last year, an ASSIST course, which is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. So what it essentially, it was a day or 2 days of me getting trained to be able to handle a situation. For example, if someone does say that they're feeling suicidal or someone who is thinking of suicide. And I just think it's such an important training course, and it takes 2 days, and it can in essence, help save someone's life. So I think if you are someone who is thinking, I wonder what role I could play within suicide prevention, or how can I get involved, I think definitely finding lots of resources that there are online. I know an incredible organisation I work with called the Ollie Foundation, which do a 90-minute free training that you can sign up to online. It's delivered on Zoom. You can sign up to it. It's usually, I think, on a Saturday morning, something like that. And it's something to sign up to. It's free. It's only an hour and a half. And it can teach you how to deal with that type of situation and how to create what you call a safe time for someone who is thinking of suicide. And I know that for so many people, that might just sound so scary, but it's better to be able to learn the skills and understand how to navigate a situation like that. Because, I mean, you might never know who you come across. It might not be a family member, it might not be a friend. It could be a stranger. You could be walking down the street and it could be a stranger who you might need to support. So I think, whether it's that empathy, active listening skills, debunking those myths around suicide, and also reflecting on your own understanding around suicide. And then, if you are really keen, taking up some of these training offers, all these resources online that can help support you in the case that you need to support someone who might be thinking of suicide.
Yes, I agree with you 100% about really educating yourself, and really being aware and identifying the signs that, someone around you, or like you said, a stranger is feeling suicidal, and I know I wouldn't be able to identify that, as I don't really know how to identify if someone is feeling suicidal, what the signs are, what it really means to come to the idea of actually being suicidal. Is a really sad and scary thing, especially if you feel like someone around you is feeling that way. So it is really crucial that you know how to support that person, and through active listening and being aware of what the signs are, and just creating a safe space for them, like you said, could really help them, and also help you become more aware of mental health illnesses and being more educated around it as a whole. I know you've spoken a lot about your journey with PCOS and your struggles with that, but how do you think PCOS has really impacted your life?
Yeah, so I mean, I only recently got diagnosed with PCOS at the end of last year, but obviously I've been living with PCOS since I was, as soon as I went through puberty, basically. And I think for me, I'm going through a journey of actually realizing how much PCOS has impacted my life. So I remember when I was around 14 years old, they first checked me for PCOS and they said, no, you're completely fine. And what I'm going to say actually now, it probably sounds like a very stigmatized topic, and I know a lot of people might feel like, why is she talking so openly about this? But I think it is so important to talk about. So at that point of time, I was really struggling with my menstrual cycle, and the doctor said, I don't think you have PCOS, so I'm going to put you on the contraceptive pill, not to use for birth control purposes, but to use to regulate your cycle. And this is such a common occurrence, which happens especially with young females, and it also happens within our South Asian community, which is that a young woman might be struggling with her menstrual cycle, and a medical professional might just put them on the pill. But in reality, if you do have PCOS or something like endometriosis, going on the pill just masks your symptoms. It doesn't treat symptoms. So then what happened was I continued to have those symptoms, but a lot of those symptoms were masked for a lot of years, until I decided to come off of the pill, because I felt like, my cycle should regulate itself. And it was at that point where I just had such a bad time with my health. So all of these PCOS symptoms that were being masked for so many years just came out. So I put on a lot of weight. My cycles weren't regular. All of these symptoms, I really was struggling with my mental health at that point as well. And I think the link between mental health and women's health is something that we don't speak enough about within our community. Is that, for example, if you do have a condition like PCOS, there's a very big link between PCOS and your mental health, and linking to conditions like depression and anxiety. Similarly with endometriosis, oftentimes if you're put on the pill to manage your your menstrual cycle, that also can have negative implications for your mental health and how you're feeling. So it was during that journey, and then obviously I had to go back to doctors and go through this journey of getting diagnosed with it. And for me, there were so many things that have come up, but I think one is that we don't talk enough about women's health because we still feel like it's a topic we should shy away from, especially within our community. So many females struggle behind closed doors because it's unfortunately still perceived as a shameful topic to talk about. And, they don't feel comfortable going to the doctors, for example, or speaking to someone around what they're experiencing. And I think also it ties in very closely with that expectations piece. So oftentimes as a female within the South Asian community, you're expected to, fulfill these specific roles. And if you have a condition like PCOS or endometriosis, which could potentially impact your fertility, unfortunately, some people still view you as less than other women or see you as, I guess, faulty. And I think that's still something I've been wrapping my head around. It's just that heavy stigma around women's health issues and specifically potentially fertility issues as well. So I think for me it's really important to highlight that and just break the stigma, because there are so many, females within the South Asian community who live with PCOS. It's so common within the South Asian population, yet we still hardly talk about it. So I think, just providing those spaces and being very open about experiences. So for me, just saying the experience there, like, it probably does feel uncomfortable at first to hear it, but it's something that's natural and it's something that we shouldn't attach shame to.
Yes, there's a huge stigma around PCOS in the South Asian community, especially women who feel like they may have it, but they're either been dismissed by the NHS, or they're told that it's a completely different issue, or in a way they're afraid to even visit the GP because they're scared of they will be diagnosed with PCOS and they'll feel like, well, I don't have any help. I'm viewed as weak. I don't know what to do. They don't really know where to turn. So are there any support systems out there, especially for South Asian women who are struggling with this?
Yeah, definitely. So I've joined PCOS Relief UK, which is an incredible charity, as an ambassador recently. And the reason that I was so drawn towards PCOS Relief UK as a charity is because they have specifically created safe spaces for South Asian females and ethnic minority females when it comes to talking about PCOS. And that's something that I felt like has been missing, because a lot of the conversations and support around PCOS have been focused on, not the community that I'm from. So for me, that's an incredible resource. I definitely recommend people check out PCOS Relief UK. They have support groups, online support groups, communities, lots of resources that you can use. They hold events. And the best thing is that you can connect with other South Asian females who are, having similar experiences, which can just in itself help you work through breaking some of those internalized stigma and internalized barriers towards seeking support. And I think they have some incredible organizations like that. And there are also some incredible people on social media platforms. So if you look on places like Instagram, there are lots of South Asian females actually talking about women's health issues and PCOS. There's also an incredible organization called Sisters, but Sisters spelled as cyst, like this, CYST, Sisters, and they're run by a good connection of mine actually from the Punjabi community. And she once again has created such safe spaces for conversations and support for females from ethnic minority groups to talk about conditions like PCOS, endometriosis, infertility, any women's health issues. So I definitely recommend that anyone listening to this does check those out.
Yeah, congratulations on your ambassador role. That's amazing to hear. From your ambassador role, have you noticed any of the biggest challenges faced by individuals who are struggling with PCOS, and how do you support them in overcoming these challenges?
Yeah, so I think the biggest barrier I tend to see is obviously the stigma, and I think the stigma looks very different depending on who the individual is. But if we think about it in the context of South Asian females, it's usually the stigma. And what I hear from a lot of females is like, if I get this diagnosis, what does it mean for me and how does it impact my life? And I think I've had those exact same thoughts of, okay, what does this mean for my future? What does this mean for having a family and things like that? So I think it's usually the unknown and not knowing the impact of that. And I think the support that we tend to do is, support groups, so facilitating spaces where females can come together and actually discuss some of these fears and these worries, because otherwise they just stay beneath the surface and they manifest in, potentially mental health problems or further physical health problems. So it's really important to provide open and honest and safe spaces for people to have those conversations. And I think what's really great is that within these communities, you can then find individuals who have had the experience that you're worried about. So for example, like I've connected with individuals who are actually, in their 40s and they were told they'd never have children and they've been able to have children. So to also be able to understand other people's experiences and educate yourself on, it doesn't have to be the way perhaps your doctor's told you it has to be. I think that's really beneficial. And for me, myself as an ambassador, I'm particularly focusing on the link between PCOS and mental health, because as for me, that's something I'm really passionate about. And for me, it's really important to open that conversation up around mental health and PCOS, because a lot of females who are struggling with PCOS might not focus on or might hide the mental health struggles that they might be experiencing as well. And so it's a space to really validate those experiences and also signpost people to, where they can seek support for their mental health, because I think that's still an area that we haven't spoken much about.
Yeah. And to anyone listening to this, if they are struggling with PCOS or just mental health in general, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, so I think the first advice I would give is you're not alone. You're completely valid in what you're experiencing, and even if you've been dismissed, your experiences are completely valid, but you are definitely not alone in what you're experiencing, and that's so important to remember. And I think the second thing I would say is that there is a lot of support out there available. Unfortunately, we just don't know beforehand in terms of where the support is and how to get it. It's only when we reach a point of struggle that we then need to find the support. So there are lots and lots of resources out there. So if you're struggling with your mental health, you obviously have charities like Samaritans, which have a helpline. You have Shout, which have a helpline, but they also have lots of online resources. You have Mind, and Mind will have lots of local branches. So check out your local Mind branch and see what support that they have to offer. You can often self-refer yourself to see their support. You obviously have the NHS. You can go to your GP. Sometimes you can self-refer into NHS services as well, so take a look at that online. And then you have lots of local support communities around your area, but you also have different support communities. So for young people, there'll be specific support communities, LGBTQIA plus communities, South Asian communities. There are lots of specific groups that you can check out. And if you're struggling with PCOS, and you obviously have PCOS Relief UK, you have business groups, you have lots of online resources that you can find, a lot of support groups as well. If you're struggling with endometriosis UK, and also these other organisations as well. So I think, there's two main things, which are that completely valid what you're experiencing and you're not alone. And the second thing is that there is a lot of support available out there. I'm sorry that it takes time to have to find what you need, because it should be easier than that. But don't give up hope, because there is, there are people which care, and there are a lot of people which can support you.
Thank you, Tanya, for sharing those really supporting organizations that can really help someone out there. But thank you so much for sharing your mental health journey and the amazing work you've done to raise awareness and support towards depression and anxiety in the South Asian community, along with your PCOS journey that you are going on right now. And thank you so much for being on this radio show. Anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you so much for having me. I think the final thing I'd love to add is that I'd love to connect with anyone who is listening to this. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and X. The username is Tanya Maleeha, so I can just spell that out so it's easier. So TANYA MARWAHA. And please do reach out. I'm happy to signpost or have further conversations with anyone who is listening. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening to her Chronicles. I hope you can take away a better insight into mental health in the South Asian community and how we are going to continue to make it better and to get more support and feel represented in the media. But inshallah, join me next week, and thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum.